DFS show with John Impemba and James Grande.
What is going on, FA Nation? John Impemba here with Keith Eister. Welcome into the Fantasy Alarm NBA DFS Playbook live show. We are looking at the Thursday 6-game main slate over on DraftKings. Keith, as I get something out of my mouth here, we are approaching the end of the NBA regular season, just about a week left to go here. Got the official word today. No surprise to anybody. Philadelphia ruling out Maxey, George, and that crew for the rest of the season. Again, as expected, we haven't had them in our lineups for a little bit here anyways. But that's just sort of a trend that we see across the league with teams ruling out players. Competitive teams, as we say every day, are kind of still fighting for positioning. You can count on those guys to see some minutes, but those teams like Toronto, Washington, Charlotte, Philadelphia, obviously now, San Antonio at times, the mix that you get with those teams and whether or not their starters are going to play the minutes, not play the minutes, seems to come and go with the wind here. So we do our best to figure it out and, we put our best foot forward for all of you as we work our way towards the end of the regular season here.
Yeah, end of season NBA DFS is not for the faint of heart by any means, but it is a good time if you're into it. This smaller slate with only 6 games, but it seems we have an abundance of those tanking teams here. About a third of the teams, I would say, we could call in tank mode. So there's some value out there. There's some good spends, though, in good spots as well. Speaking of the competitive game environment, I think that's a decent way to attack a slate. And that Golden State Lakers game looks like it should be a really competitive team against two teams that are fighting for playoff seeding.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thunk it, right? That Golden State and Lakers would be where they're at, earlier the year, with some of the struggles that they've had there. And now they're competing, for playoff positioning and playoff spots there in the Western Conference. So we got that. We just did get some, actually, there's a Friday news update. It says, hey, Mark Williams is going to play, but that's for tomorrow. All right, your top guys overall, Giannis 12-1, Luka 11-9, LeBron 10-1, guys up over $10,000. If you're looking at the point guard position, Luka against Golden State, Curry at $9,400, Ja at 91, just getting the league warning there on the finger gun taunt. And then Tyler Hero off of another good game against Boston, the other side of that Memphis matchup at $9,000. Where does Luka rank for you in terms of overall spend-ups on this slate? And is he the top guard for you when it comes to this tier?
Yeah, he is the top guard in the tier. I think the more interesting conversation is Luka versus Giannis as the top overall spend on the slate. You're looking at game environment with Luka, I think, where Giannis is missing Dame Lillard, so he has that added ceiling. Choosing between the two, it's a slight lean to Giannis, even with the lesser game environment for me. Just haven't seen a massive ceiling from Luka playing next to LeBron, and that's understandable. All the rates look really good, though, I will say. His field goal percentage is down a little bit. He's just not quite shooting the ball as well as he has in his career. We don't expect that to continue. I mean, he's got a lengthy track record of being around 45% for his career. He's down around 41% with the Lakers. So expect that to tick back up a little bit, which should add to his ceiling. He's been fine. He just hasn't been putting up those 60 fantasy point games that we're used to seeing out of him all that often. It's a close conversation. I could be talked into Luka as well, given the game environment. But for me, it's a slight lean to LeBron or to Giannis, rather. I'm sorry.
Sure.
And then talking about the other 9K guards, I think it's a really strong range as well. But Luka would be my preference amongst the top 4 or so. We just saw Steph go absolutely bananas again. Had another 12-made 3 game. Just an incredible guy, this Steph Curry. We know he can go off at any time. This game environment, we expect him to play big minutes. That's been kind of a knock on Curry throughout the season, that he's playing more low 30s than he is upper 30s. But I think we could see that shift in this type of game. 37 minutes in that last game. The Warriors are very live for a strong seed in the NBA playoffs. So they're going to be giving it their all in this game with a team that is in a similar situation on the other side. So Steph would be my next look there.
Sure.
Ja's been playing well. It's hard to argue against him as well with the coaching change there. A guy that has a weapons charge on his record that's probably not the best gesture to be doing, but it is what it is. He is playing this game. That's really all we care about for this slate. He's been playing well. It's the matchup for me against Miami. They're just a slower paced team.
Yeah.
Ja can find a ceiling in any matchup. So again, I have some exposure, just not as much as I do to Luka and Curry. Hero looks really good. He gets a pace up spot on the other side of that matchup. Memphis is the fastest paced team in the NBA, and Miami is notoriously a slow paced team. So
Yeah.
this is a nice bump for the Heat, where it's kind of a downgrade for the Grizzlies. So give me Hero over Ja. Just Hero's been incredibly consistent. No Aaron Witt or Andrew Wiggins again.
Yep.
Like massive ceiling here for Hero in the spot.
Yeah, I really like it because, at this position specifically, everybody is, if they're spending up on Luka. There's a lot of value on this slate. Ja also drawing a little bit of attention, but you can pivot to that, like you said, to Tyler Hero in this matchup where it is a big peso spot and he's not coming off the floor. And I understand it's a back-to-back, but 38 minutes in a game, they won by almost 20, and doing what he is doing pretty consistently, good or bad competition, bodes well for him at the $9,000 range. So I'm with you there. Your highest rostered player on the slate, Giannis is that guy. He's 35%. If you're looking at just sort of non-value plays, so a lot of people aren't agreeing with you. They're going Giannis over Luka. You're getting about almost a 50% ownership discount playing Luka instead. But there's just sort of the thing you have to deal with when it comes to Luka, knowing LeBron's there, knowing that Austin Reeves has been productive. Needing him to give you that at 60 fantasy points at 12K, he's come close. He can get there for sure, but the competition there. And then we have the comment in chat from Chris. He's not on the injury report, so I don't think we are too concerned about any sort of injury with Luka. But at this point, no one's probably playing at 100%. So I guess all varying degrees of injuries.
Is there a game where Luka doesn't have some injury? He's constantly holding something or grabbing at something.
His back is consistently spasming. So
yes,
it's all kind of in the mix there.
Yeah, he's playing 37, 38 minutes a night. I do not think the Lakers would be running him out there for that volume if there were any concerns there.
I agree with you. Shaedon Sharpe coming off of a huge game, obviously getting some love here. No Scoot Henderson, and we're going to see what happens with Anthony Simons questionable. If Simons gets ruled out again, I really like this Portland-Toronto game. Just, bad-ish teams. I understand there are better game totals on the board or maybe more appealing matchups, but Toronto's going to be playing a whole bunch of backups. Sharpe, Denny, those are two of my favorite plays of the slate. Denny regardless, but Sharpe steps right in there if Anthony Simons ends up being ruled out.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I love this Portland team tonight. I cover Boyd Abdia for the playbook, and Sharpe looks like a really strong play as well, especially if Simons is out, like you mentioned. Just playing a ton of minutes. The usage has been incredible. Ever since he stepped into the starting lineup, Scoot Henderson out as well. That raises the minutes floor. So, yeah, I'm on Sharpe whether Simons plays or not. If Simons is out, Sharpe might jump Denny for my favorite play on the slate just because he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot more. The shot should be there regardless, but he'd be handling the ball a lot more if there was no Simons. I'm going to have exposure either way just because he's been playing incredible basketball, and the matchup is as elite as it gets against Toronto. They're shorthanded. Scotty Barnes is on the injury report again. If he misses, they're going to be extremely shorthanded. Even though him and Barrett have been active at times, Toronto is still limiting them. They're attempting to tank. They're not having the success as some of the other teams. But the matchup against Toronto is elite, and Sharpe's been playing incredible.
Agreed. No disrespect to the rest of the tier, but after that, it's just all the value guys that are getting ownership love here tonight. Ryan Rollins, Jamal Shed, Davion Mitchell, Kevin Porter Jr., Bub Carrington is getting some love, obviously, coming off some of the games that he has had. He's the most expensive of that group at 55, and then you have everybody else under $5,000. Are you riding in the chalk with Ryan Rollins, or do you have a different value point guard that you're looking to play tonight?
Yeah, the value tier is strong. I think there are a couple of options. One name I wanted to mention before we get down there, D'Angelo Russell, with a really shorthanded Nets team. It's a bad spot for him against the Timberwolves, who play outstanding defense. He played 31 minutes in the last game. There's no Cameron Johnson. There's no Cam Thomas. He should theoretically have plenty of shots available. He played a great game last time. He only took 10 shots, I believe it was, in that game, though. D'Angelo Russell is a guy we've seen not afraid to let it rip when he is given the opportunity. Yeah. This is certainly a spot where he has opportunity if he wants it. So not an ideal matchup. the 31 minutes were really nice to see. Just wanted to mention his name. I do really like him as a low owned tournament play.
Good tournament play, right? Because he's at like 7% right now. So if he goes out and takes 20 shots tonight, because he's looking around him, he's like, well, none of these guys can score. So,
right.
I might as well try. I don't hate that at all for tournaments. And then again, we do get to the value. Carrington's in a bad spot against Orlando, but playing a lot of minutes because of who they have available to them. And then it's Milwaukee. It's Jamal Shed, who when he gets extended, a lot of upside. Delano Banton, if Simons is out, will start again. $4,300 for him. Where do you look to go?
Yeah, I don't know. The Bub Carrington minutes look incredible. 36 minutes last game, 41 minutes the game before that. So again, this is one of those risky situations where Washington might decide that they've seen what they want to see out of Bub Carrington, and now all of a sudden he's back down to 28 minutes. Know that risk is there, so I don't love playing him into ownership. But if you're getting 35 plus minutes out of him, then he's too cheap for that role, no matter the matchup. So not the best spot, and there's some volatility in these recent minutes, I think. But still, he'd be a really strong play if he sees mid-30s minutes again. Down in the value tier, Rollins looks awesome. No Damian Lillard. He stepped into the starting lineup, is playing at least upper 20s minutes and playing well with those minutes. Gets an awesome matchup against Philly, another one of these teams that is just kind of thrown in the towel for the season. They're going to be running a bunch of non-regular rotation players out there for a bunch of minutes. So great spot for Ryan Rollins. Hard to argue with the ownership for him. Jamal Shed is a really interesting name to me, especially if Scotty Barnes gets ruled out. There would just be a lot more shots available, a lot more ball handling responsibilities available for Jamal Shed. So I love him if Barnes is out. Even if Barnes plays, I think he's playable. He should start again. He's not playing as many minutes as you would necessarily want him to. He's been more in the 26 to 28 range than 28 to 32 that you might normally expect out of a starter. But I still think he has plenty of upside. Portland is not the best defensive team. And I think there's upside on those minutes. If we get up 28, 30 minutes, Shed looks really good to me. Banton would be ahead of him if Simons also gets ruled out for me. We just saw it in the last game. He started and played really well. Banton, definitely a guy that can fill it up. So we talked about him on Tuesday, saying if Simons gets ruled out, we'd be all over him. That came to fruition, and he did not disappoint us.
Nope.
So no problem going right back to Banton.
We did just get some Brooklyn news. Russell is in as we expected. Jalen Wilson is out. So I'd imagine we're probably going to get some more Brooklyn news here momentarily. But as we expected, a shorthanded Brooklyn team tonight.
Yeah, definitely. And that just goes back to my interest now that D'Angelo Russell's officially active. He's kind of the last guy standing there. So good to fire some of him up. There's some other interesting Brooklyn pieces that we'll talk about too, that we could maybe mix in with some of this point guard value that we've just discussed. KPJ is a guy who, if he got the run, I'd be interested there, but it's clearly Rollins at this point. So even trying to get cute and go with maybe Milwaukee tries some different things, like Rollins has been playing well enough where I feel pretty secure, and I'd rather play into the Rollins ownership than try to do something like play a KPJ instead.
Yeah, agreed. Jordan Poole being out tonight. AJ Johnson, Bub Carrington, straight cash as obviously Johnson here, another guy getting a whole lot of minutes. So
big minutes, lower per minute producer. So he needs to play 30 plus for him to have a chance to get there. But he currently has had that role. So I don't hate the AJ Johnson call out.
Agreed. Moving on over to the shooting guard position here. Anthony Edwards, $9,800, gets that shorthanded Brooklyn team. You do have Quentin Grimes at $9,100. We know Philadelphia continues to be shorthanded. Milwaukee, not a great defensive team. When we did the preview show this morning, we thought and were correct. And Grande actually nailed it. Third highest projected roster shooting guard of the slate, Franz Wagner. This man is $8,800. We looked at it. He's only paid this price tag off twice since February. And yet they don't move his price tag, and everybody continues to play him. Are you paying $8,800 for a 20+% rostered Wagner tonight against Washington?
Not at 20+%. Is there a world where Franz finds one of those 50-point fantasy games? Yeah, it's certainly possible. We just haven't seen it enough where I'm willing to play him into 20% ownership. It's obviously an awesome spot against Washington. One of him or Paolo is probably going to get there and find a ceiling game that's useful in GPPs. But
One other guy, which I'll mention shortly, as well.
Fair enough. We haven't seen it enough from Franz. So if he's popular, I'm out on him, and that's kind of the way I've been handling him for a month, and it hasn't burned me yet.
I agree, 100%. I don't mind going Quentin Grimes again. I don't think Minnesota game is going to be competitive enough. Now we've seen Anthony Edwards obviously go out and score 35 in 30 minutes, and that's fine. It's a 13-point spread in that game. But Grimes for me, I think I prefer to go in that direction. Just knowing the minutes and his usage rates there. You have Bain in that slow-paced game against Miami. RJ Barrett not being on the injury report is so frustrating because we're like all geared up and ready to go and playing, Jacoby Walter and Roden and like all these guys. No, RJ is going to play 27 minutes tonight. Why do this to us? Right?
Yeah, it makes him unplayable for one, and then it impacts the ceiling of all these 4K value guys that we want to play.
Exactly. So annoying. So I'm out again. You can play Sharp as we kind of discussed here. You can play Carrington. I guess you play the surviving Brooklyn plays. Like yes, DeAndre Russell's active, but Keon Johnson just by default has to see minutes because they don't have anybody else. So you could go there at $5,300. What else are you looking at playing?
Yeah, I think I'm getting more weird down in this lower range. Like the top tier of shooting guard, I'm not finding anything to love. We talked about Barrett. Bain has Morant back in a tough matchup against Miami. We talked about Franz. Reeves is playing next to Luka and LeBron. Like, how's he going to find a ceiling? Not to say it can't happen. I just don't think it's going to happen often enough. Grimes is probably the most interesting name to me, but even at 9,100, I mean, he has to be incredible, and he has been, but not the best matchup against Milwaukee for him. Who knows if that game stays competitive long enough? So I'm finding myself down in this 5K range more often than I am spending up here at the shooting guard position. Keon Johnson, definitely a name I have some interest in, playing big minutes. He did what I kind of expect D'Angelo Russell to do and get the big usage spike with Cameron Johnson out. Obviously, Cam Thomas has been out for a while, but add Johnson to that, who has been a big usage guy for this Nets team. And there's shots available for somebody. Those shots went to Keon Johnson last game. His usage rate was up over 34%. I don't know that you can expect that to continue, at least at that level, but I feel pretty good about a mid-20s usage rate for sure. And the 30 minutes are going to be available to him as well. So with that type of role, he is too cheap for this spot, in my opinion, even though it's a tough matchup against Minnesota. So fully in on Keon. Talked about AJ Johnson as a guy that we liked a decent amount.
Yeah, Lonnie Walker's the chalk here, 40% right now.
Yeah, and it's hard to argue with what we've seen from him as well. The minutes have been ticking way up for Lonnie Walker. Had been kind of in that mid-20s role, playing off the bench a little bit. Now he's joined the starting lineup, and he's played 30-plus minutes in 2 straight games. Again, this is a situation where we don't know that role is fully secure, but if he is in that role, he's probably too cheap. So certainly don't mind exposure to Lonnie Walker. Wish the ownership number was a little bit better there. A pivot to a guy like Tyrese Martin with that Brooklyn situation, I think is fine. Gary Trent Jr., a guy who's found a bunch of shots in games that Lillard has missed, so don't mind a look at him. Let's see. There's a lot of interesting names down here. Jacoby Walter.
Martin probably plays. Yep. Pell Larson's been starting and playing good minutes for Miami and being productive at it as well.
Yep. Don't mind either of those. Walter is another guy that I wanted to highlight. The role for him has been really good. Again, if Scotty Barnes does not play this game, I'm going to have a ton of exposure to the Toronto value.
Sure. I like that. Small forward position. LeBron is here at 10-1 if you wanted to spend up. Again, you have him as your cover. I've said time and time again, if he's going to get extended, he should be one of the favorites on the slate. That's Denny Avdia. Under 20%, just a tick under 20%, but I thought like coming off 72 fantasy points, 50 fantasy points before that in a matchup against Toronto, that more people would be in on him. And yet you see, at least from what I'm looking at, Kyle Kuzma is getting more ownership than him. I'm going to have to look into the Jalen Wells ownership there. He's getting a big bump tonight as well as a mid-price value play.
Yeah, I don't know about the Jalen Wells. No, Vince Williams maybe is impacting his minutes projection a little bit. So I understand it, but I would look other places, I think. Let's start off with Abdia though, because he's clearly one of the favorites of both of ours. The role has been insane. He's playing upwards of 38 minutes every game, and he's scoring and he's rebounding at an elite level. He's way too cheap for his role. Ever since Jeremy Grant has been out, he's kind of stepped into this upwards 30s role, and he's showing massive ceiling. He's gone over 60 fantasy points 4 times in the last 10 or 12 games, something like that. But the ceiling is absolutely incredible. 8,600 is not enough. He should be 9,600 in my opinion. Give me a ton of Abdia. I don't care what the ownership number is. I would want to be over it. At 20%, I'm going to be at least double the field on Abdia.
Right. More people are playing Wagner than they are playing Abdia for $100, $200 more. Make that make sense.
Yeah, that feels like a mistake.
Right? Doesn't it feel like a mistake? We got Butler at $8,500. No one's really playing him there. Mentioned Barnes and Barrett already. Kyle Kuzma, as I said, not named Lonnie Walker. He's the highest roster player with small forward eligibility. Again, he's been good, right? He's kind of paying off the tag, but like only paying off the price tag. We haven't really gotten a ceiling out of him. Safe for cash games. What do you think the appeal is here for Kuzma?
The appeal is no Damian Lillard, and theoretically, kind of like I was talking about with D'Angelo Russell, this is a guy we've seen fill up take a ton of shot attempts, 20 plus shot attempts in games throughout his career. He's not done that in this role with the Bucks, and I understand that Giannis and Dame are the primary scorers, and that's not the role that he was acquired for. But now that Dame is out, like you would expect a pretty big usage bump for Kyle Kuzma, and we just haven't seen it, and that's why he hasn't been able to find the ceiling. If it happens, then the ownership is justified for sure. Like 25% usage and 35 plus minutes is not out of the question here for Kyle Kuzma. That's an insane role for 6,200 Kyle Kuzma against Philly, who we've been targeting for months now. So I understand the Kuzma ownership. I think it's a bit of wish casting though. So if you wanted to go for the Kuzma fade, I'm on board with that as well. He hasn't stepping up like you might think that he would with Lillard. He's been good, but he's not playing the role that you would think he would play as a guy who should be the number 2 scoring option here.
I agree. Working our way down into some value. Again, you could play Lonnie here. Someone's going to play him at shooting guard or small forward. Tamani Kamara, $6,000 for him there. Champagny, if Washington is going to give him the minutes, it's been productive. He's 53. What are your thoughts as we work our way down?
Yeah, we talked about a lot of these names at shooting guard as well. So there's plenty of options here. There's just not a ton of new stuff to talk about. Kamara is a name we haven't mentioned that I don't mind. Has a solid mid-30s role. Been playing over 30 minutes consistently, so don't mind that. Champagny, I'm on board with as well. Again, this Washington team, who knows what's going to happen with the minutes, but taking some shots that somebody finds their way into 32 minutes is viable in my opinion. Not many other options that we haven't mentioned. Jalen Martin was inactive last game. He played significant minutes over the last few games. So I don't know what his role looks like. If you knew he was getting upper 20s minutes, similar to what Champagny has been getting, Martin might be an interesting name, but
they ruled out Colby Jones yesterday, and he's off the injury report for today. He's also was playing a lot of minutes, so maybe you go Colby Jones if he's starting or something like that tonight.
Yeah, I definitely keep an eye on the Washington starting lineup, because literally both of these guys, Jones and Martin, are live for DNPs if they are not starting. So it's a risky thing that I would only do in large field tournaments, but I think it's a way that you could find an unowned value piece.
Yeah, and then like I said, like 27% or so is getting into Jalen Wells, at least for now. It could certainly update as we get closer to roster lock tonight, but I understand he's kind of always had a role. The minutes have been fairly consistent, but like the production, it's like, he's 3,200, so he is getting you there. It doesn't seem like he's going to exceed, 7 or 8x. You might just get the 5x if you're cool with that. Yeah,
really low per minute guy, understandably playing next to Ja and Bane and Triple J. Like there's just not a lot left over for him. Even Aldama, I think, is ahead of him in that. And
Aldama been playing starting,
and Edey's been playing well. So like I get that maybe he gets a small usage or minutes bump here with Vince Williams not active, and that usage or minutes bump rather is probably where the ownership is coming from because he is near min price.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of strong value in the 4Ks. I think I try to avoid going down to Wells just because he's so low per minute.
Sure. Power forward gives you Giannis, as I mentioned. If you're spending up, he is the top spend up guy on the slate tonight. Coming off 69 fantasy points, obviously showing you what a ceiling can be. And Philadelphia is not going to do anything to stop him today. So if you want to, as we've highlighted, plenty of value to get to Giannis, and that's why almost 40% of the field is getting to Giannis today. So probably just plug him in and take what you get. 14% around the field is playing LeBron at 10-1. And then you have Banchero. We talked about not really caring for Franz. It's mostly because Banchero's been doing a lot more of the damage here. Interest here at 9,900.
Yeah, definitely. And as a Giannis pivot, I think it's definitely viable. I think it's even viable to play them both if you want to find a way to do that. There's enough value you can do that because Paolo is one of my favorite plays on the slate. Giannis, if he wouldn't have shown that massive ceiling, we would have had a little bit of different tune about his production with Lillard off the floor as well, because he hadn't been showing massive ceiling. But now that he has come out and it was 32 points and 17 rebounds, that's the type of stuff you would expect with Damian Lillard off the floor. He gets the elite matchup. It's hard to poke holes in Giannis today. The blowout, I think, would be the biggest path to failure. And in that case, he ends up with 55 fantasy points. Well, Paolo Banchero can do that for significantly cheaper. So I think it's definitely viable to have some lineups where you do pivot to Paolo. He himself has an elite matchup, Washington, a team that we've targeted for years in NBA DFS. Don't play any defense. They play fast. Paolo's just an elite option for sure.
I agree. We did just get Rashawn Holmes ruled out for tonight. He did get injured last night, so I don't think that was too much of a surprise there. Be interesting, I guess, to see what we can trust for their rotation, because they had been resting Vukovic on second legs of back-to-backs. They gave Anthony Gill 31 minutes last night. I don't think I really want to go there either, but no Rashawn Holmes certainly changes a little bit of what they can do there. Other power forwards, you get Bam in that pace-up spot at 88. Triple J, other side there at 79. Julius Randle has been really good lately, $7,800, but has that Brooklyn matchup here. What are your thoughts on that rest of that like AK group?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so in love with Giannis and Paolo that I'm not getting to a ton of this range. Randall has been really good, like you mentioned. I don't love the matchup against Brooklyn, being a slow-paced team. You have the blowout risk as well. Draymond coming off an outstanding game. Kuminga's on the injury report again. We talked Tuesday that we really like Draymond. Once Kuminga was ruled out, he was incredible for us. I'm not getting to a ton, just there's value at other positions, but he's totally fine. I love the game environment for Draymond. That's one of the best things that you can say for sure. There's like Butler is fine, but I don't know what the ceiling is. Steph is really the guy you want to play for ceiling, I think. Butler could find his way to 50 fantasy points, I suppose. But again, not a ton of exposure to this range.
I'm with you there. Again, you want to go down into some value, you can play Draymond Green, I think, at $6,500. Sandy Aldama at 55. Also, I think in a really good spot here today. And then you have Trendon Watford, who I think by default kind of has to play given the injuries that they have.
Yeah, Watford has been interesting. Historically, he's been a really strong per minute player, but he's not necessarily been that here of late with Brooklyn. So the upside intrigues me. The recent form has not been anything to look forward to. So I find myself getting to Aldama more in that range for sure. Yabusele is interesting if he plays. He's questionable on the injury report, has missed a couple of games here recently, but a guy that has found a little bit of ceiling. Not the best matchup with Giannis on the other side, of course, but he'll be playing big minutes. It's Aldama pretty clearly in this 5K range for me.
Agreed. Value for you? You have Mobo. If they have like Baji back, like it's so difficult to go with the Toronto guys here. Is there a value power forward that you're keying in on?
Mobo would be the guy. And again, these guys all get massive bumps if Scotty Barnes gets ruled out. Like if Barnes goes out and plays his 27, 28 minutes, these guys feel safe enough. They give you optionality in your lineups to spend up for the Giannis's and things like that. If Barnes gets ruled out, this is a different conversation. This is priority options here with guys like Walter and Shed and some of the others we talked about. Mobo he's just been a consistent guy. He's playing 24 minutes every night basically. I don't know that his minute ceiling goes up even if Barnes gets ruled out. So you're probably getting what you're getting. The role would increase a little bit. He'd have more opportunity for scoring and rebounds and things like that. But I don't see him playing 30 minutes. So you're probably getting your 24, 25 minutes either way. But I'm intrigued at 4K with the production that he's been giving in that time.
Sure. We had a comment on Marcus Smart. Probably like 20, 23 minutes. Nothing. They're not going to play him 35 today. So I wouldn't really count him too much into taking away from like a Carrington or something like that. I'd still bank on those guys playing over. Value tier, JT Thor is getting like 6%. He played a bunch of minutes last night. I don't want to play JT Thor.
I mean, that's a name that I feel like you could have in your lineup, and then he just DMPs. Like that could absolutely happen.
Yeah,
so
I don't want to play JT. I'll let the 6% have their fun with JT to Thor there. All right, center position we go. A lot of these guys, of course, we've talked about already. I'll just jump to the one guy I want to highlight, and you can go about who you wanted to. I mentioned an Orlando player earlier in the show. That's Wendell Carter Jr. 2 games against Washington this year, 24.5 minutes. 33 fantasy points, averaging a double-double. You go back to the last matchup they had against them, he played 29. He had 38.5 fantasy points, 16 and 12. Centers just do whatever they want against Washington. Yes. Alexander Sarr is not a good defender. He's a good shot blocker. Vucevic is not a good defender. He's a stretch big. You know, whatever. If it's Anthony Gill getting minutes there or JT Thor getting minutes there, they're not obviously good enough to play. So while as inconsistent as Wendell Carter Jr. has been this year, this is a spot where almost any center has been a viable play. And at $5,100 against Washington, I like some Wendell Carter today in a position where I'm like, the position's fine. I'm almost more likely to play Giannis at the 5 today than I am really anybody else. Is there a center play or two that you're playing more than the others, I guess?
Yeah, it's not the strongest position, which it generally is. So yeah. a little bit of a different dynamic here. I don't mind the Wendell Carter Jr. call at all. Awesome matchup. Like you said, Washington has been just, if not the best, one of the best matchups for bigs all season long, even for a couple years now, to be honest. Mm-hmm. It's tough to know that he's going to play those 29 minutes. If he does, he's an absolute smash. Yeah. Even at 24 minutes, I'd be completely in. If they do this thing where he plays 18 minutes, that's a little bit more concerning.
You hope not, right?
If we knew he was playing mid-20s minutes, he'd be massively popular on the slate. So dealing with that risk to get him lower owned, I think is a worthwhile trade-off for sure. So I'm in on Carter as well. One of my favorites, let's see, where do I want to go here? I want to talk about Vukovic, but we'll start in the top range. Rudy Gobert, I think, is really interesting with what he's been doing recently. He's been playing up close to 35 minutes nightly. He's taking more shots. And if he's going to shoot more, we know he's an elite rebounder and he's an elite shot blocker. So now you have a fantasy profile that we can be excited about, especially if he's playing 34 minutes. So if this game stays close, Rudy Gobert should absolutely smash. You have the risk that it doesn't stay close. So it's a large field tournament play only, but Gobert finding a ceiling would not surprise me at all. Moving down, kind of skipping over.
Right? Edie at 45?
Yeah, I do. Edie's role has been interesting. Obviously, you have a coaching change here, so you always want to pay attention to rotations after coaching changes. 31 minutes in the last game. I don't know if he's going to continue to play that at that level, but if he does, he's way too cheap. I know that. It's not the best matchup in the world with Ware and Bam on the other side. I will say with Miami going double big, I think that increases the chances that you see 30-plus minutes from Edie again. Yep. You have Ware on the other side, who's a true post player. He doesn't have to chase him around the perimeter. Edie could very well play 30 minutes here, and he is way too cheap for that role.
And likewise for Ware, right? We've seen times where Ware gets taken off the floor because they go smaller. They're not going to be able to go small if they go the Triple J and Edie lineup. So you can see Ware in those 30 minutes. When he plays 30 minutes, you got the double-double, 13 and 14 against Philadelphia. Obviously played 32 in a tough spot against Boston. They got blown out. wasn't his best performance there. But when extended this year, we've gotten some big numbers out of Khalil Ware. So no one's obviously playing him there. In terms of ownership, it's 40% right now on Edie. And then Drew Timme is getting the ownership at $4,100. Whether that's due to lack of depth or they think blowout, are you in on the 20+% Drew Timme play tonight?
It's hard for me to be in on that. He's had a real role recently. So I certainly understand it. This just not a name that we thought was going to matter in the NBA, really, when he was tearing it up in college. But here we are. He has found his way into a rotation. So I understand it. I think there are other plays in the 4K range that I prefer over him, especially if I can find some guys with lower ownership. Mobo is a guy we've talked about who I'm in on for sure. I'd play him over Timme. Orlando Robinson is a name I would look to pivot to. Has kind of had an inconsistent role. We've seen as many as mid-20s minutes out of him as low as high teens.
No Jakob Poeltl, though, so it's there.
Exactly. Like he could find his way into 25 minutes today. That would not be surprising. I think the highest ceiling definitely comes from Vukovic. Not the best matchup in the world, but this is a guy who produces fantasy points. That's what he's out there to do. 1.23 on the season, I believe it is now, and even higher than that here recently. He's been playing 22 minutes. It's a back-to-back for a guy that, as John mentioned, has been sitting back-to-back. So there's risk of DNP here as well.
I mean, I don't think they can DNP him just because they don't have anybody else, unless they really went committed to Anthony Gill, JT Thor, backup 5 situation here.
Exactly. And if you think back a couple of years ago when Gill was an actual rotation player, he was a guy that would sit on back-to-backs as well. So they might be out of options. Like somebody's going to have to play this back-to-back. And if it's Vukovic, like he's got a massive ceiling. And it doesn't have to be much more than 20 minutes. Like 24 minutes, we'd be thrilled with that.
I agree. All right, let's get a lineup build going. I think we agreed on going with Giannis here. And what do you want to try? If we do Giannis and
Abdia or Sharp, one of the Blazers guys would be my next click there.
And then we'd go value. I guess we'd go down to Edie at 45. What's some of the other value that we have?
I feel pretty good about the Toronto stuff, even if Barnes plays. Walter's he's probably the most comfortable. I feel plenty good enough with Shed as well, even though the minutes haven't been as strong as we want them to be.
I'm good with that. All right, so that gets us to 57. If we go Shed, Walker, Denny, Giannis, Edie, Walter, we can fill in with a couple of more plays here. Aldama maybe against Miami.
Definitely a name I like. Ryan Rollins is a guy.
Rollins, Rollins is a good one. So we can go Walter at the small forward. So we'll go Walter. And then that gives us a 67 util. 67 util. D'Angelo Russell, Draymond Green, Sarr. Got a preference of that crew?
I'm really intrigued by D'Angelo Russell, especially if nobody's playing him. Even though he didn't shoot, he was still really good. He had 47 fantasy points or something like that last game. It's like the matchup I get is scary, but the role should be incredible for him.
Ronnie wants to know, do we have any love for Brook Lopez? I think Brook Lopez is always a guy that's in play.
Yep.
Good shot blocker, can go off in tournaments and score. Where's Brook Lopez here? $6,000. The minutes are always really good. Big game against Phoenix. Philadelphia, it's certainly a matchup he can take advantage of. Played 30 minutes against Atlanta, got iced out. They lost by 20 in that game. I'm fine with it in tournaments. It's a fine play. And then would you lean in on Prince or Trent? Prince is actually getting some ownership tonight. AJ Green did just get ruled in. He had been ruled out in previous games. I don't know if that would necessarily impact either of those two in terms of their rotation, but Prince is much cheaper, I believe, here.
Yeah, scary floor for both of those guys. I would definitely want to mention that. Prince is really low per minute. I think Trent has the higher upside. It's Trent's 4,500, Prince is 3,800. So there is a little bit of a price gap there. If you can do something with the money, I'm fine with Prince, but if it was straight up 1v1, it'd be Trent for me.
Yeah. Dez asking about a Dembona here. 32 minutes
Yeah.
for him. Again, been fine. Going to play. The minutes will be there for him. I feel like in tournaments, I still like Wendell Carter's upside. And obviously, Edie at 45 is a little bit cheaper. But if you're in this range, I'm fine going at Dembona. Yabu, do we know? Questionable. If Yabu's out, it certainly helps the Dembona a lot more.
Yeah, I agree. If Yabu gets ruled out, I think Bona has a great ceiling.
Agreed. So, guys, just an example line for all of you here. Keith's got your playbook out live on fantasyalarm.com right now. You can check that out for free. When you go to fantasyalarm.com/win, you can scan that QR code right there on the screen. That gets you access not just our NBA product, but our MLB DFS as well, along with MMA, NASCAR, the rest of NHL, and all the good stuff that comes with the All-Pro subscription. So you want to check that out, fantasyalarm.com/win. We'll be back later tonight with the preview show for Friday. We'll be live on Friday, and we'll see you then.